The old saying, elections have consequences, is playing out in very real time in a very real way in cities all across our country as the Trump administration makes good on one of Trump's most controversial campaign promises, a promise that was immortalized in that sea of signs at the Republican National Convention. Mass deportations now. 1 week into Trump's second term, it's no longer an abstract idea or controversial campaign promise or even a convention sign. The deportations are underway. Over the weekend, we saw them in cities like Chicago, a city Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, has repeatedly taunted, calling Chicago ground zero for mass deportations. In all, ICE made 956 arrests on Sunday in Chicago and around the country, quote, the largest single-day number to date by the Trump administration, and at least 2,681 arrests since his inauguration last Monday. Those numbers may or may not tell the whole story. It is an open question how Trump's mass deportations will ultimately stack up against previous administrations. But one thing that is not an open question, one thing we don't have to wonder about, is how it feels if you are undocumented in America right now, or even if you worry that you could be mistaken for being undocumented because of the color of your skin or your name. This is a headline out of Chicago. Quote, "We are terrified." The New York Times spoke with one man, a man who was born in this country, who said this, quote, "I can tell you that even for those of us who are citizens or have a green card, there's fear. I'm scared myself, not that I'll be deported because I was born here, but I'm scared that I may get scooped up in a mass arrest." That fear of mass arrest and disorientation and uncertainty is not an unintended consequence or a design flaw of Trump's mass deportations. It is the design feature. It is exactly what the Trump administration intends. And you don't have to take our word for it, because as usual, the Trump administration is saying the quiet part out loud. Here's Vice President J.D. Vance.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce the law everywhere to protect Americans.
Effect, a chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their kids to school.
I desperately hope it has a chilling effect on illegal immigrants coming into our country.
I desperately hope it has a chilling effect. There you have it. The cruelty, the intended fear, the intended confusion, the intended chaos is the point. It's their objective. It's also where we start today with NBC News national correspondent and executive producer of the documentary film Separated, Jacob Soboroff. Jacob, first tell me what's going on all across the country. Start with Chicago.
I think, Nicole, what we see is what we see. The facts on the ground are the facts on the ground. They are carrying out deportation efforts, immigration enforcement operations, to use the specific terminology that the Department of Homeland Security uses. But whether or not what we're witnessing is the largest mass deportation in American history is still, if not up for debate, a story that is yet to be written. There is a major show of force going on across the country, started by the Trump administration, to create the perception that immigration enforcement is out in the streets all across the United States of America. And I think that it's important to note that that is indeed happening. And there are people being deported, likely as you and I are speaking right now, back to their home countries. I think it's also important to underline that what we have seen play out in Chicago and Atlanta and in Phoenix and in Denver and in Los Angeles and in cities throughout Texas over the course of this weekend are also enforcement operations that have played out historically in the United States of America, both under President Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, and President Trump's predecessor in his first term, President Obama, who deported more people than any president in the history of the United States of America. There are certainly differences that we have seen played out, including the mobilization of the U.S. armed forces, like the military, the Marines, for instance, we've seen down on the southwest border. But they are playing limited enforcement roles in these circumstances. And in the interior, though, you have seen agencies like DEA join forces with other Homeland Security agencies like HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, and ICE and ATF participate in this type of enforcement action. As you said, there is certainly an effect that's happening here, that people are aware of this, that they're cognizant of it. But what's sort of the larger story is here is, as I said, and I think it's important to understand and for people to remain cognizant of, it has yet to be written, and these are unfolding on sort of a day-by-day, almost hour-by-hour basis now.
So I want to press and try to deepen my own understanding of what's different other than the production of it. I want to share some reporting about quotas. This is from the Washington Post. ICE officials have been directed by Trump officials to aggressively ramp up the number of people they arrest from a few hundred per day to at least 1,200 to 1,500 because the president has been disappointed with the results of his mass deportation campaign so far. That's according to 4 people with knowledge of the briefings. Senior ICE officials were told that each of the agency's field offices should make 75 arrests per day, and managers will be held accountable for missing those targets. So, I mean, quotas do make it more likely that the thing that people who are here legally, who spoke in that reporting I read from, could get swept up. If you're trying to hit a target in any quota in law enforcement, speeding, anything, you can make mistakes. And I wonder, the reporting is out there that the numbers didn't even match the numbers under the final Biden numbers. And so I wonder if you can just tell me the role that the statistics and the numbers are playing in the policy and a policy of quotas that seems to increase the odds of mistakes being made.
Well, you know, I don't want to use too strong of language here, but whether or not they're obsessed with the numbers, they have made very clear they want the largest deportation effort in American history. Mass deportation now was what the sign said on the floor of the Republican National Convention. It was an official part of the party platform, a part of the Trump campaign, and they're certainly working hard to create the appearance of that. And like you said, in many respects, this is a production. Dr. Phil was out last night live with Tom Homan, who, when the borders are for President Trump, when he was confronted by our colleague Gabe Gutierrez about whether or not there are actually quotas, he denied that there were. But the numbers have certainly gone up from the day-to-day numbers of the outgoing administration. But whether or not, and I think this is really important for people to understand, whether or not these numbers that they have made a feature of their Instagram posts and their social media, Twitter posts and stuff, whether or not those numbers stay consistent at this level is a function of how many quote-unquote criminals they're going to go after. And if violent criminals, people who pose a threat to society, are their priority, what happens beyond those numbers? Because certainly if you're going to run the largest mass deportation effort in American history, you are going to be picking up people who are everyday civilians in the United States of America who, while they might happen to be undocumented, are also teachers, workers, neighbors, friends, people who are at your church. And that's, I think, part of this story as well, that they have removed the sensitive locations guidance from the Department of Homeland Security. So now undocumented immigrants, and Tom Homan confirmed this to Gabe Gutierrez, could very well be picked up at a school or a church or another location. He says it's a matter of national security, but you don't stage the largest deportation effort in American history without undocumented migrants who don't have criminal histories.
Jacob Soboroff, we're going to need you. Please stay free at 4 o'clock Eastern. Thank you for your reporting on this. And of course, the Trump administration says this is just the beginning, the opening salvo, if you will. They've indicated that one of the next towns that could be targeted could be Aurora, Colorado, where over the weekend, quote, hundreds of community members gathered in the snowy cold Saturday at Fletcher Plaza to protest Donald Trump's threat of mass deportations, a rally that drew as many as 700 immigrants, activists, and allies. Joining our coverage is Democratic Congressman Jason Crow, who represents Aurora, Colorado. First, what are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, Nicole, I represent one of the most diverse communities in the country, right? And I just want to paint a picture for you. This is a community where nearly 20% of my constituents were born outside of the United States. I have 130 languages spoken in my public school system, right? And these folks are business owners. They go to school with my kids. They work in our businesses. They are so much a part of the lifeblood and the strength and the vibrancy of our community, and they are afraid, which is why I'm standing up and I'm being very clear about what we're going to tolerate and what we won't. You know, and I think this is important for every American right now, to be really clear about what it is we're dealing with. I haven't heard or talked to anybody who says we shouldn't deport and detain violent criminals, that we shouldn't clean up our streets and keep communities, keep our children safe. Everybody agrees on that, and it's already a crime. What we're talking about is a mass deportation that's rounding up everybody, children, families, business owners. And I would like somebody in the Trump administration to explain to me how doing that is actually going to reduce costs, help our businesses, help our communities, and make us more safe. Because doing that will do the exact opposite, and they know it.
So what is a list of what you will tolerate and will not for your district?
Well, I'm not going to tolerate mass deportation efforts of children and families and people who are striving to start a life here, who want to normalize their status within the United States. We owe those folks comprehensive immigration reform because that's in our best interest of our economy. Right? I spend a lot of time with small business owners. You know, Colorado is a small business state. Aurora is a small business state. 85% of our workers and our businesses are small businesses in my community. Right? And those folks, when I go and visit them, they say their number one problem is workforce. They want to grow their businesses. They can't find enough workforce. So we owe comprehensive immigration reform. That's visas, that's DACA programs, that's providing a pathway to citizenship who are here, who own homes, who are already paying taxes to normalize their status because that's what they want to do. And that's what's in the best interest of our economy. What I won't tolerate, and what nobody should, is violent criminals, right? Yes, go after violent criminals. It's already against the law. And guess what? We had a bipartisan reform effort in Congress last year that was heavily negotiated between Republicans and Democrats that would have provided more enforcement, would have provided more border security, would have provided pathways to citizenship. Donald Trump blew it up because he'd rather run a campaign on the problem than try to solve the problem. So let's go back to that and actually talk real solutions and come together to solve this issue instead of doing what they're doing and trying to distract America with mass deportations, while at the same time, their billionaires and the cronies and the top 1% are slowly turning our government into a piggy bank for their own pockets.